Police story. I was a new cop. My FTO and I were on a residential street in the middle of the night. We found a car positioned perpendicular to the road, and the driver seemed to be trying to get it turned around, but just kept moving back and forth. We contacted the driver, who was a female in her early 20s. She was lucid and coherent. She asked me how to get to a nearby neighborhood called Joaquin Murrieta, but she was being somewhat evasive in her answers to my questions. Eventually, she reluctantly told me that her family was being held hostage, and the only way she could get them released would be to complete her missions for the CIA. I figured she was on drugs or just crazy. My FTO was a DRE, and he determined she wasn't on drugs. Okay, so she's just crazy. Then, she told me that she had a device in the car, which was like a handle with an arrow on top of it. She said if she held the device, the arrow would glow when it pointed in the direction where she's supposed to go to continue her mission. I asked if I could examine the device, and she said sure. I decided to humor her, and I held the device out while slowly turning in a circle. To my shock, the arrow suddenly brightened when it was pointed towards the Joaquin Murrieta neighborhood, and only when it was pointed in that direction. She had an expression on her face like, "See, I told you." I'd never seen a device like that before or since. My FTO was freaked out, and he told me, "She's not committing any crimes, so let's get out of here." So we left. To this day, I have no idea what was actually happening there. Late night UFOs. One night, quite a few years back, while working in a medium-sized county as a road deputy, I had a reserve officer riding with me on the night shift. We were just outside of the largest city in the county, near an old air base. We had stopped to stretch our legs and take a nature break. It was around 3 a.m., plenty dark away from town, and a beautiful, clear, and mild night. As we were talking and looking up at the sky, something caught my eye. Due west, there was a bright white light of a good size that appeared to be from my angle of view, maybe 200 yards above the treetops and several miles away. What caught my eye was it changing colors. I know at night stars appear to be flickering different colors at times, especially if you're staring at them. But this was not a flicker. This was an object, and it was slowly changing colors. White at first, then it faded into a bright red, and stayed that color for about 2 minutes, and then faded into blue, again, for about 2 minutes. This went on for about 10 minutes, as we watched it. So it was not a plane, their marker light flash. Well, after about 15 minutes, it started to move. Slow at first, side to side, then up and down. This was very noticeable, as it moved quite a ways. You could tell by using the stars in the background for reference. It moved this way for a little bit, then stopped, did a loop or a circle, then went back stationary. I got a call from one of the city officers, who asked me to meet him at a farm implement place at the edge of town. I asked the reserve to kind of keep an eye on the object, if he could. When I arrived at the place, we were to meet the other officer. A sergeant was parked facing the road, and that put me pulling up beside him. Me facing due west, he wanted to check if I had my paperwork on arrested, and I had assisted him with. As we were talking, I was looking up and watching the object. It was still doing what it had been doing. The sergeant had noticed that I seemed to be preoccupied. He said in a fairly loud and commanding voice, "Will you please stop watching that thing, whatever it is?" I asked him how he could not know what I was watching. He said he had been watching that damn thing for about an hour, off and on, and was creeping him out. Suddenly, I shouted, "Damn, here it comes!" The sergeant put his patrol car in gear and tore out of there like his tail was on fire. The reserve and I had a great laugh about it for 10 minutes. Then, and over the years, about the time we had settled, I went back to checking our light, and while I was watching it, it appeared to just move rather quickly, about a couple hundred yards, and then it turned away from us. It was gone. Now, the strange part here was, just about 5 or 6 years ago, a gentleman contacted me saying he was a UFO investigator, and he asked if we could meet him. I asked why, He said that he had been informed that I had reportedly seen a UFO some years ago. He stated the approximate date, time, and location. I asked how he knew this. He said that he was looking into the sighting in the area and happened to speak with a dispatcher who had said she remembered me talking about something around the time. I asked him for his name, if and who he was working for, and a phone number, which he gave with no problem. I told him I would get back to him within 24 hours. He said, okay. I made contact with that dispatcher. She still worked at the sheriff's office, where I had worked at the same time with her. She confirmed his story. I did an internet search on him and the organization he said he was doing research for, which was a freelancer. On the website, I read a couple of his reports/stories, and even saw a picture of him. I called him the next day, and we set a date to meet, in a public place of course. Well, I told him my story, and asked him why the interest now. He said that a man had finally reported what he'd seen near his place, about a UFO. He also said that a couple of neighbors had also given him statements about it, and that he had stopped by the local sheriff's office to see if anyone else may have reported it, and that's how he came to talk to the dispatcher I had worked with, and she had given him my name. He explained that a law enforcement officer gave the sighting a little more credibility, and in turn, the others seeing it gave me more credibility. At the time of the incident, I didn't think a whole lot about it, but for some reason, this kind of shook me up a little bit. Entry tools. I responded to a suicide as a Coley detective. A male had hung himself in a tree in the backyard. We checked the residence and it was locked with a deadbolt thrown on both the entry and egress doors. I called for entry tools and a supervisor for a breach because the decedent's girlfriend was not accounted for and they lived together. Possible murder or maybe suicide. Several patrol officers and I were standing at the back doors of the house, south side, which had been checked multiple times, waiting on entry tools. I look at the door and there's a gap in the frame and see there's no deadbolt thrown anymore. I check the door and it's now open. We clear the residence and no one's inside. I even had them clear the attic space. Inside that door that magically opened were multiple notes to the family members from the decedent. We all walk outside and are waiting for an okay to arrive and try to walk back in. The door is secured again with a deadbolt. It should be noted, no one had keys and there were key locks on both sides of the door. The lead and I were now discussing how we're going to call for entry tools, and again, the door was open. No one was going near it. I again had the residence cleared, and no one was inside. The lead detective and I did not go back in the house that day. Hind legs. One year, our department started receiving complaints of headstones being knocked over in the city cemetery around Halloween. The chief advised us on the midnight shift to spend our extra time around the cemetery to catch the person or persons causing damage. Me being sneaky, I found a good hidden observation point about a block away. There were two major lit streets providing fair light in the cemetery. For several nights, I would from time to time stop and check the cemetery with my binoculars, and only patrol the cemetery at the start and end of my shift, as usual. One time, checking the cemetery, I spotted something that looked like a cat walking on its hind legs. I watched it walk approximately 10 feet between headstones, and then lost sight of it. I rushed over to the area with my patrol car, turning on my spotlight, alley lights, and takedown lights. I couldn't find a thing but a track through the dew on the grass that dead-ended at the headstone. To this day, I can remember how it moved and its outline in my binoculars. Creepy. I'm an avid hunter and I've done plenty of hunting at night. I'm very familiar with all the animals in my neck of woods, and I have never seen anything like it. Just saying hello. A couple of years back, I was patrolling around 0300 and 0400. I drive by a small airport in my jurisdiction that is in the middle of the woods, which has several hangars and one main office building. I drive by it a few times at night, as it has been burglarized in the past. On this particular night, I'm driving by and I hear an audible alarm sounding from inside. I was not dispatched, and I did not receive any other calls about it. I call it in and walk up to the building, which is completely dark and not occupied. Every point of entry is secure, so I'm now waiting on the key holder to let me in so I can clear the inside. I figure a loose door, the wind, etc., tripped the alarm. The key holder comes out with his wife, and in a couple of minutes they open up the door for me. I clear the entire office, a garage, etc. Nothing is disturbed. The key holder is confused, as the alarm is not a motion alarm, nor an alarm system. The key holder explains to me that the alarm is coming from a cash register that was open inside of the office. The cash register could only be opened by pressing a hidden button, which I'll say was extremely well hidden, without going into too much detail. The only people who knew where the button was located was he, his wife, and his deceased father. He told me that the cash register closes and locks, and without pressing this button, it couldn't possibly be open. It was not an oversight neither, as I had driven by several hours before and heard nothing. The money was not disturbed. However, the register was all the way open. The key holder smiled and told me that his father had created and owned the airport before he passed away, and that the airplanes and this place in particular were his passion and life's work. The key holder told me that he believes his father does things like this to bring his family to the airport just to say hello and make his presence known. I don't have any other explanation for it.